music, right? That would be.
This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you, Jessica. If you haven't done so already, please put your name, email, organization in the chat so that we can collect proper attendance records for our shareholders. So like we mentioned, we are required to submit attendance records and then also follow up with you with any resources and evaluations for after the session. So you putting your information in the chat is really helpful for us whenever we download the attendance record. Sometimes it doesn't explain who exactly logged in. So we appreciate you taking your time. If this is your first time coming to an ECHO session, I'm going to post a little resource guide in the chat because we want to make sure that we have enough time for our presenters today. So if this is your first time, there is a link that you can take a look at, and it talks about what makes an ECHO different from a typical webinar series. So please check that out if you are interested. And we're going to start with some introductions. So we'll start with our ECHO Hub team. I am Krista Ofstall. I am the Project ECHO Coordinator here at NDCPD at Minot State University. Prior to my role here at the center, I was a DSP for 4 years and also worked at a disability organization providing assistive technology and many other projects. So thank you for coming. We appreciate it. Jody, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Jody Patchen, and I am the admin for the Project ECHO.
Thank you, Jody.
Hi, I'm Jessica Reiswig. I work at Minot State University. I do the mentor coordination for the A-STEP program, and I manage about 40 plus mentors that work with students with disabilities going to college.
About his desire to kill lots.
And today, Linda.
Okay, I will sign you in.
Linda, our other team member, is in a different meeting. So she is also on our hub team. She is with the University of Minnesota. It's been an excellent partnership that we weren't anticipating when we first started this program. So we're very excited because Linda also connected us to our presenters who are here today, Susan O'Neill and Barbara Kleist. So go ahead and take it over. I will pull up your presentation.
Okay, welcome everyone. Krista's going to pull up the slides here in a minute. And my name is Susan. We're going to do introductions on our second slide, but the first slide gives you the title of this. And I think some of you, when you first heard about this session, heard that it might have been something like how to have difficult conversations or things like that. And the point really was, you know, how can we support folks? So I did change the title to First Support to Employees Showing Signs of Stress, Burnout, or Mental Health Distress. And I think that change is representative of some things that will help you and help the employee, in that when you are supporting an employee in this situation, it's good to have the focus on them. That does not mean you will not be having some anxiety yourself and be thinking about things for yourself as well, because these are often somewhat difficult conversations because you don't always know exactly what to do. So, but trying to keep it on to the support part is really helpful. The other thing is, you guys are getting familiar and using the chat right away. We thought we'd do like a little warm up trickle chat on if you can share something in the chat that does not cost money but makes your day better. We thought that would be a nice touch to a resilience conversation.
Turn my volume up so we're not like echoing.
Sure.
And I think we'll have a reminder that, yeah, there we go, muting when we're not speaking, which is awesome. And we do welcome questions both through the chat and verbally throughout the day. If I was typing into the chat right now, I'd be putting that one of the things that helps me, that's free, that helps me have a good day, is if I get at least 30 minutes in bed before I have to get up. I am somebody who likes to stay in bed and stay cozy for a little while. And if I can get to do that, my day is so much better. The other thing I want to point out about the title is this is first support. And so one of the things we're going to have to manage in terms of attention around these kinds of things is that some of these things will feel like performance issues, and we're going to try to manage that carefully in the session, but you do have to be aware of your HR, your human resource policies and procedures for things, and make sure you're really familiar with those things so that you're comfortable knowing when do I need to engage formal systems versus when can I have more of an informal conversation that's supportive to this employee and helping them get back on track. And then just finally, I want to thank you for being here because I know every single one of you is so busy and has so much on your plate. And so I appreciate that you're here with us and going to spend some time with us. So I really hope you get something out of this that is helpful, even if you can just take away one nugget of something that you might think about or be able to help you when these kinds of things are coming up. So we'll go to the next screen and do some quick introductions. So as you know, my name is Susan O'Neill. I'm the first presenter on that slide. And I think, you know, when you get to be my age, you have a whole lot of things you could talk about. For me, I think the important things I want to share with you is that I spent 12 years doing direct support to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and working as a frontline supervisor, peer mentor, someone who did peer training, and those things were really important to me. And they're what led me to the university. I was very fortunate to be able to parlay those experiences into ongoing looking at what's happening with our direct support workforce. How are we training folks? Today, my primary role is in developing curriculum that supports people in those roles and other roles in the long-term care system. But that is always my roots. And I'm very excited to be with people who are thinking about these things and appreciative of the work you do. I'm also currently a guardian for someone as a friend who needed more help getting through the crisis systems and who has an intellectual disability as well as a mental health disability. And I have some background in sort of community and peer education in mental health. One of the things I have that in my back pocket for resilience that keeps me from burning out is what's called my Wellness Recovery Action Plan. It's a RAP plan, and I do have a resource for you at the end. And it's something that I think people should be thinking about. It's an evidence-based wellness and recovery tool in the mental health community, person-centered plan that you build for yourself. So something to think about. I'm going to let Barb introduce herself. And
Thank
we'll
you,
get to the
Susan.
presentation.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Barb Kleist, and I have a similar pathway to my colleague Susan O'Neill. I have actually only been at the university for the last 10 years. I'm coming up on my 10-year anniversary this month. And prior to that, and for the last 30 years, I started out my career as a direct support professional and did a lot of relief work as well. And then moved into work as the bulk of my career has been around supporting individuals and their families and service providers in conflict resolution and mediation. Sometimes when services weren't working out, that was my approach to advocacy. I worked for an advocacy organization, and then I also had a part of my career was as an attorney representing families and individuals in guardianship proceedings. I bring to my interest in the workforce is related to my work in conflict resolution and mediation, and knowing that oftentimes conflicts really at the core was staff that didn't have the resources that they needed and supervisors that also didn't have the resources that they needed. So coming to the university and having the opportunity to work with Susan and others on workforce development and workforce strategies is really a passion of mine because I see it as a real key to improving quality of life for people. I also come with personal experience. I have been an unpaid caregiver, if you will, for my sibling who is 10 years younger than I am. And so since I was 10, I've been providing supports to him and continue to do so today. I also provide informal supported decision-making supports for a couple of self-advocates, as they choose to be called, in the community who don't have any active family members. And I do that on a voluntary basis as well. So I have some connections and roots in this work in a wide range. So Susan, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, we can go to the next slide, Krista, thanks. So we wanted to give you an idea of some things that we're planning to talk about. I will tell the team I'm trying to keep up with the chat, but I'm noticing if I miss something in the chat, please, that you think is important, please uplift it, because while I'm trying to do the slides, I'm finding it a little more challenging than I thought it would be. Just to give you a sense of what we're going to cover today, we just want to take a look at the state of stress and burnout for DSPs. I know you guys have had some some previous stuff that has talked about this. So we won't do that too hard, but we want to just share and make sure we kind of normalize what's happening. Some of the things you're experiencing are things that other people are experiencing as well, and give you kind of a bigger snapshot on what that looks like. Then want to make sure we're kind of clear on what these situations might look like and what we're really talking about, and have some time there to think about that. And then what are proactive strategies that prevent this from happening? These are the most important strategies, honestly. So you want to try to help people, keep people from getting into the situation where all these things are happening. At the same time, life happens. So people have a whole life outside of work that can be bringing a lot to their stress and their feeling of mental wellness and things like that. So sometimes it just bleeds into work, even if you're doing a great job at work, trying to help folks. But we want to look at what you can do in your role as a supervisor or a manager. And so give you some ideas for helpful responses. We'll be using the chat throughout, and the more you guys use that, we appreciate that. And as I've noted, we're not going to do the HR processes and laws. Those are things that you should know or certainly be investigating, and make sure you're checking with your HR folks to understand, what you should be doing. I think the other thing I think about is if you are having a conversation with someone about these types of things, informal documentation is not a bad idea. If you are engaging a formal process, say you're engaging the Family Medical Leave Act policies that you have at your organization, then you need to do whatever is for that. But if you're just like, I don't know what this is yet, and that's going to be common. Just take some notes. I talked to Judy on October 20th at 3 o'clock, and here were the key points. So that's just something to help yourself so that you can, and hopefully what the end result is going to be is those are just thrown in the trash. They're not, and make sure you don't put people's identifying information in those, but that the situation is going to resolve before you go into formal processes, or if you go into formal processes, it's something that is acceptable, because some of those are really helpful. I personally have taken the Family Medical Leave Act for stuff that I needed for my family, and it's a wonderful thing that it was there for me. I also want folks to remember as we get into this that really an employee's well-being is their own responsibility. It's not something that you're responsible for, but there's a lot that can go on at work that can help or hinder somebody's wellness and their feelings. And there are things you can do as a supervisor or a manager or as an organization that can enhance people's wellness or degrade their wellness, honestly. And so work is a very important part of people's lives, and you want to do whatever you can to keep your employees feeling good and able to be productive. But be really cautious that you don't become a therapist, a counselor. There are boundaries to your role. And so you're just going to be trying to stay in your area of expertise and connecting people sometimes when they need to go out to other things. The other thing is, this might take you as a supervisor, it might bleed you into somebody's personal life in a way that you have not previously done. And you have to be really non-judgmental about people's lives. It's not, that isn't what's going to be happening here. But that doesn't mean you don't care. You do care about how people are living, and that's okay. It's okay to care about your employees and their personal lives. It's just, you're not there to judge it or correct it or guide them. And really your role is to explore and discover and connect them appropriately, as well as set the appropriate boundaries and supports at work. So we'll go on to the next slide. That's kind of a setting of the tone there. Oh, it looks like we have a bit of maybe the slides didn't translate as well onto Krista's, at least on my view. I don't know if
it's a problem slide, Susan. It's been in every presentation. We've had problems.
Oh, okay. It shows up fine on my computer when I do it, but
slide gremlins.
All right, just kind of setting the tone of some of the things that we have that we know are going on out there. There's all sorts of stuff happening actually to look at stress and burnout, and just what is the state of work for people in these roles. Some of that's kind of exciting, and it's time for us to start looking at that. So I think there could, even though this is a really challenging time for all of us, I really feel like there is some good that can come out of it. And one of the things we've tried to do is gather some research. This particular research was done in conjunction. It was a national survey of over 5,000 DSPs and people in similar roles in conjunction with the National Alliance on Direct Support Professionals. And as you can see from the slide, at 12 months post-COVID, there's a lot of stuff happening for folks that tells you people are feeling, I mean, when 50% of respondents are saying they're having some sort of physical or emotional burnout, that's pretty high. A lot of anxiety going around, even some people feeling that they are suicidal. So these are quite serious things that are happening. And it's something that we want to think about and make sure that we're recognizing our DSPs and our frontline supervisors, and frankly, our managers and everybody throughout the organization. We're feeling stressed. So we really have to get vigorous on how are we managing that? How are we managing it as individuals? And how are we managing it as an organization and as a community? And so some of the things that came out of this that aren't on the slide is that, you know, DSPs really are talking about they're working really long hours and they're bouncing around to different locations. Their schedules are much more chaotic than what they have felt in the past. And they're not feeling as supported as they need to be to get through this. And so about 15% of people said they really saw an increase in mental health issues over that time. So we'll go to the next slide. So this is your first opportunity to kind of weigh in on the chat and give us some ideas. But one of the things I want to frame this in is the idea of, do we value our direct support professionals? And do we value our frontline supervisors? So I want you to think about yourself as an employee and think about what are some ways that I have felt valued as an employee, that I feel like somebody is showing me the things that make me feel like I'm appreciated and I matter, as well as you could share some things that you do to help others feel valued as employees. I'll share with you, like, for instance, Barb is actually my supervisor. And one of the things she does that really makes me feel valued is, I mean, Barb's a busy woman, and she gives me at least an hour, sometimes 3 or 4 hours a week, one-on-one, for us to process and work together and figure things out. And that makes me feel very valued. That makes me feel like she thinks that time is important and that our connection is important. So that would be kind of an example of one way that I feel valued at work. Let's see what some other folks are thinking. So it's like the one-on-one check-ins with mentors. I saw it easier said than done. Yeah. Wow.
Giving verbal praise, including DSPs and team meetings for person-centered planning processes and for developing supports. One-on-one check-ins with mentors. Yeah, easier said than done.
Yeah.
Oh, I like handwritten notes, thank you notes, verbal praise, financial incentives, good communication, feeling like their input is valued in clients' plans. I have to ask about this one, Susan. We have the FROG program. FROG stands for Forever Recognizing Others' Greatness. Anything from small acts of kindness to going above and beyond. Our staff are recognized. Some great chat. I hope everyone is looking at the chat if they can for some ideas. Acknowledgement achievements, listening to. We have a kudos system in which we can give points towards staff and write a message about what they did to go above and beyond. Points equals rewards. Face-to-face conversations on a weekly basis. We send out notes to staff about what we appreciate, specific things they did. Shout outs on personal messages. So a lot of active engagement. From folks. Taking time to listen and reflect with me after a difficult conversation is also someone said they feel valued as an employee.
Right. And I think some of the things we can take away from this, so I really appreciate your connection and keep the ideas coming. Here's delivering cookies. That's always a value added for me. I think some really important things to think about is that when we show value to others, and you may have seen it in this, is that it's very unique what people feel what makes a person feel valued. So you want to make sure that when you're showing value, it's really something that means something to that particular employee. But I did see that that many people do appreciate those one-on-ones, those connections, the relationships as much as they appreciate some of the other things. The other thing when you think about valuing people is that authenticity is really important, and sometimes specificity is important. So, you know, the thank you card somebody was talking about, if you just get a generic thank you card, you often don't know what that is, but if there's a specific thing that's very clear to the person, then they know what it is, and that helps them really connect to what you're trying to appreciate. It feels more authentic, I think. It's really important to know that these things don't have to cost money. Like someone just said, say thank you. Whenever you see the DSP at the office in a text message, kudos, etc., not just on a special occasion. So those things don't cost money. And I know the debate is always about wage out there in terms of like, and we are going to talk a little bit about that, but I do want people to have the reminder that once basic needs are met, once people make enough money, and whatever that is for them as a unique individual, what's going to keep them in a job is not more money. It's how do they feel appreciated? How do they feel connected? How do they feel empowered in their role? So things don't have to cost money, and more money actually causes problems when you start throwing money at it if they've got their basic needs met, which I would say for many DSPs, that is not the case. So we have to think through that piece as well. Time and attention, opportunities for growth. Those are things that we often don't think about. And ultimately, everybody just wants to feel like their supervisor, their coworkers, their organization actually cares about them as a human being. So any way you can help that happen is a really helpful thing. Anything else on that before we move to the next slide, Barb?
Oh, you had just asked me to share a quick example, and I think it hits on so many different things. But as a supervisor, everyone's schedules are full, and you noted that. And I really have to be intentional. I have to think about it, and sometimes I forget, and so I have to give myself some grace. But I try to figure out with everyone, my direct reports, and then people who are called indirect reports, meaning that I supervise their supervisors. On the team, I really try and figure out something that's important to each one person. And because then that helps me in, if there's a problem to be resolved or to connect with folks. So for example, for Susan, I know it's really important in any given week that we have at least 30 minutes of FaceTime at some point, even if we don't have time for that 2 hours or 3 hours, but just sometimes it's 15 minutes, but that face-to-face time versus a chat, a text, or an email. And so I try to pay attention and then customize that support. And it can be a challenge for I have 18 people that I supervise directly or indirectly. So I can imagine that that's a challenge. But that's something that I have to constantly remind myself to be intentional about that. So it takes a little bit of work on my part.
And I think we'll talk more about that tension for supervisors with way too much. Everybody has way too much stuff to do. And this can be difficult to prioritize. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Just wanted to kind of, like I said, bring us to the national picture. We really do have a national problem with lack of value. We know that in general, direct support professionals and many people in our roles are not thought about very much. And they're not, the roles are not high value roles in our communities. Again, I think COVID might be, it's a mixed bag, but it might be helping people to wake up to the reality that these are very important positions. But people have low wages, unusable benefits because they cost too much out of their paycheck. A lot of times they're not given opportunities for career advancement, or the ones they're given are not the ones they want. They don't necessarily want to go into management or supervision. They want to do something else in terms of growth. May not have access to high quality training. And all of that just kind of creates a cycle where it's really hard to find people because they don't know about the jobs, or what they know about the jobs is not very appealing. And then also once they get there, maybe they're not seen as very important, or even though people might give lip service to it, they haven't set up the organization to really uplift and support folks. And then ultimately that always ends up for the people supported as less quality and support. And so those are important things that we want to consider when we're thinking about all of this. As a supervisor, it's sometimes you just feel like, at least when I was a supervisor, like, oh my goodness, I'm not, what can I do? But I'm going to admit, I wasn't the world's best supervisor. I didn't have the skills I needed at the time. I was a young woman who did great at direct support, which is a common pathway into supervision. And I was very caring in a certain way, but I did not have the same kind of skill set I have today. It wasn't transparent to me, and I got no training. And I think that's kind of a common scenario for people as well. But if I had realized how much power I had to make things better for people by paying attention to the needs of the people who reported to me, it would have really made a difference for me as a supervisor in terms of what I thought about my job. So I want you guys to really know you are one of the most important linchpins to the quality of services is how the supervisor supports their staff and creates that environment for those things for thriving. Some other things I just want us to touch on before we leave this slide is that when we talk about valuing, we also have a little problem of maybe not thinking carefully about how we're valuing everybody, and some equity issues in valuing and who we value and who we support. So what's really important as a supervisor is every single person who reports to you has to be important to you, has to be someone that matters to you, and you have to find a way to work with them to help them thrive in the organization. And it's something that some folks challenge us more than others, and this is part of being a supervisor. And you will have structures in your organization and just structures of how support is delivered that make it hard. One of the toughest things for a lot of supervisors today is that they're remote supervisors. They're not working at the same time with the person. They may not see them in their environment. So you have to figure that out, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And just a final thing is you got to value yourself. You're a very important person. You're making a difference. You have to take care of yourself as well, and prevent your burnout and stress. You got to keep an eye on that as well. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to point out was the survey looked at what challenges people were having, but they also reflected on and asked for people to report out on some of the things that were helpful to them. On this slide, you're going to see that first paragraph is about, a recommendation that DSPs could benefit from access to counseling and support. And I always think about that, we talked a lot about doctors, nurses, first responders, and it helped us realize that those folks needed access to counseling and support because they were dealing with a lot of things that were very stressful and sometimes very heartbreaking. And this is reminding us DSPs fall in that same group. They are out there in the front lines managing a lot of stuff that's pretty complicated and sometimes scary, sometimes sad, and without enough support or recognition. So we do want to make sure that people know that counseling and support is there for them, and we want to try to think about that within our organizations. The second thing is just some of the things people cited worked for them in terms of just flexibility. Like if you can make their schedules flexible, give people time off, let them work from home when they can, make sure they get access to training and education that is meaningful to them, and just showing appreciation in some of the ways we just talked about. So we'll go ahead. The next slide. All right, so this slide actually has 10 bullets. It has the top 10 reasons that direct support workers left their jobs. Some of these I have highlighted in different colors, and for those of you that don't see different colors, I'll still make it clear to you which is which. But the issue is some of these you have a lot of control over and a lot of influence over as a supervisors. Others you have less so. In this field, we all have to start caring about some of these things, such as wages, but they may not be something that today you as a supervisor can do much about. other things you can. So the very first, the 10th one is that 16% of people did not find their training or support. They thought it was poor or inadequate. And that is definitely something a supervisor can work with, because really, while we send people to training, much of what they learn is on the job. So making sure they get those opportunities to learn on the job with helpful support of people who are qualified in the sense of, it doesn't have to be you as a supervisor, but is there more experienced staff? Does the person who is receiving services themselves have a role in that, or their family members? But those are really important things that help people feel competent and confident in their roles, which is what we want to have happen. So we can go to the next bullet. So 9 is too little time with and or poor quality from supervisors. So 100% in your domain of something that you can work on. At least you may not be able to please everybody all the time, but as you grow in your role as a supervisor, you can definitely improve. These are skills that can be learned, and you can make a difference in that way. The next one, could not get along with coworkers. Again, we don't always think about it as a supervisor. We think, oh, why can't people get along? But some of the things we do as supervisors and managers and organizations can support that or make that harder. For instance, if you are in a situation where you have an employee that is not really up to snuff, really not doing what they're supposed to do, that really makes it hard for the other people that work with them, not only for the people supported, but it starts to create tension. So you've really got to think about the whole group. People complain about fairness with their supervisors all the time. So they want to, as a supervisor, they want to know you're paying attention and that you're attending to each of them, if not equally, because people don't need equal attention, but equitably in a way that makes sure that everybody can perform their best. Go to another one. Found a job closer to home. I would say this one is a little out of your domain. Will go up. Not recognized for the work they did. We talked about recognition, valuing. You guys have a lot of ideas about that, and that's something I see you're thinking about. Still, people are about 33% of people, certainly the people that are leaving, are not feeling recognized for the work they did. So think about that in terms of when you're thinking about recognizing people. And again, these can be simple things, but they need to be there for people to, and sometimes it's your best workers, because you're just like, oh, well, they know what they're doing. They're doing great. They've got it figured out. They still need to hear that you're happy with what they're doing and that you appreciate their attendance and their attention to their jobs. Another one, supporting people is a difficult job. 36% left for that reason. That is not one I feel like that you have a huge amount of influence, although you can think about, are there things we're doing that make it more difficult than it needs to be? So there is some organizational structure things, but it may not be the job for everyone, or they may not be matched to the right folks. So that's something you can think about as an organization. All right. 38% no opportunity for promotion. As a supervisor, it's really important to know, what are people thinking about with that? I was someone who was constantly kind of pushed into that promotion track, even though I wasn't that interested, and that actually was counterproductive for me. But I also had coworkers that were being overlooked for the promotion track, and that is a problem for them, because they would have stayed with that guidance and that support. And so that's something as a supervisor you can know about and can help customize. Where do people want to go with this? Next. They found another job that worked better for their family. The hours, again, that's a very personal thing you may or may not be able to control. They found another job that offered better benefits. Again, not necessarily in your wheelhouse, although again, you can advocate within your organization to think about these things. And then the top one is they found another job that pays more. And we talked a little bit about this earlier, but these top 3 are sort of big organizational things. I don't want you to get into the mental trap of saying we can't find people because of the wages, the benefits, and those kinds of things, because once we've met those basic needs and expectations, that is not what's chasing people from their jobs. When you see this arrive up here, it's because as a general class, these jobs do not pay very well, and we need to think about those kinds of things, and we're not giving out the kinds of benefits that people need. Barb, did you have thoughts on that before we move to the next slide? Okay. All right, we'll go to the next slide. We're going to pop into the chat again. So we've kind of talked about, I told you we're going to talk about what's the state of what's happening for folks. Now we're going to we kind of moved into a little bit of like, where might you be able to support people uniquely in your role as a supervisor? And now I want to talk about, what does this actually look like? So I'd love for people to share in the chat. What does it look like? What might you hear, see, or notice? How would you know that you had an employee that was stressed out, burned out, or in some sort of mental distress? What kinds of things are you all worried about or seeing? Negativity, calling in. Okay, yeah. Isolation. Oh, spreading gossip around the office. Other thoughts, things you might see or hear? Lashing out. Ask how they are doing. You can tell a lot by their response. Arriving late. Let's try to get in maybe 4 or 5 more. Changes in work styles. Less involved, quiet quitting. Quiet quitting thing is just amazing. They may start having health problems, cynical responses to new initiatives or program improvements. Yeah, okay. So you guys are seeing, a lot of this is a behavioral thing, and somebody kind of latched onto it in one of their responses. Is what we want to think about is, for sure, these are a change, right? Because if it's an ongoing issue, it might be a performance issue that needs to be handled in a completely different way. But when you're thinking about stress and burnout and distress, it's somebody that was performing in an okay way at some point, and then suddenly there's been a change. I think the other thing that we don't think about, but the person might literally come to you. And they might come to you and say, I have to quit because the hours are not working for me anymore. And they're all stressed out and they're all worried about it. And it might be something that actually could be solved in another way, but they've maybe already gotten to the point where they're trying to solve it for themselves. Or and I want you guys to think about if somebody comes to you and says, I'm really stressed out at work, or I just feel like I can't do what I need to do. Really feel honored by that, because they are telling you that they trust you as a supervisor to help them with this situation, and they cared enough about the job to come in and try to seek help for a challenge that they're having. So if somebody comes to you in that way, really honor it, really respect it, and really we'll talk about the ways we can kind of respond, but really give it that space. And you've hit on a lot of these things. We're going to see like attendance issues. We're going to maybe see people crying or being very grim or not very happy or just flat, like I just got nothing, I can't participate at all, maybe doing the bare minimum. You might not see those directly as a supervisor, but you might indirectly hear reports of that. And so that's something to think about too, is you may be getting some of this secondhand, and you've got to figure out how to do that. And those reports might come from coworkers, or it might come from the person they're supporting. So these are all kinds of signs that maybe something is happening.
And Susan, there's a comment in the chat about, I try to prevent them from quitting by prefacing at the beginning, this is not something, not working to come talk to me and we can work together on it. So really kind of that initiative. And I think what you've talked about is this is where you as a supervisor skirt up against oftentimes there's a HR response to it, a performance response. And so by this first noticing these signs of stress, I believe it's Carrie, indicated that, her practice of bringing, connecting first and finding out what's going on before initiating or moving into that HR response piece of a full-blown performance or those types of things, really as a supervisor, understanding what's going on with the person.
Yeah, and I love it. I love Kelly's thing, because it's transparency. You're acknowledging people might feel these things, and you've set the tone that you're there for them right from the start. So that's an awesome sort of strategy. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so what's a supervisor or manager to do? I want to kind of talk about these things, and then we'll kind of quickly go over some other kinds of things that can happen before we jump into our scenario. But this one is sort of this is the basic plan, right? The first thing to do is prevent these things from happening. And the things I really want you to think about, some of you are doing them already, which is make sure that you're connecting with your employees regularly, preventatively connecting. I make all of my employees, and I say make because not everybody loves the idea at first, have an hour-long, no agenda meeting with me every month. And it is the best thing I've ever done as a supervisor. And it shows up every year on evaluations as one of the best things I do to support folks. So it's just making sure you're in contact with people, help them develop the skills they need, and create an environment of psychological safety, which means they know they can make a mistake and you're still going to have their back and help them through that. Be prepared, and well, with the prevent, also take care of your own mental health. Be prepared emotionally and practically for these things. These are not surprises. It's going to happen. So just know about what resources and what the policies and procedures are, and be prepared for it to happen so that you can be present when things do happen. I want to give you a quick example where my friend lives. He lives in a small group home. They had a huge amount of change in the people who were living there and their needs. And it never occurred to them that that might be disruptive to the staff. So they lost all of their staff literally because they weren't prepared to kind of support the staff through those changes and figure that out in a proactive way. So that wasn't a good situation for anyone. Lean in. So if this happens, don't ignore it. Don't think it's going to go away. It mostly probably won't. And so it's really part of your job as a supervisor. So just take the moment, take the pause, and then get ready to get in there and support that employee. Regulate, take it slow. So this is going to make you anxious, probably. It's going to make the employee anxious. You're going to be seeing things that maybe are uncomfortable. So you want to make sure you're regulating yourself. You're making sure you're calm. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to kind of take it slow. Make sure you ask the right questions in the right environment. So a big thing you're doing here is exploring with the employee, not telling them things. You're supporting them, not fixing. You're trying to help them understand what's happening and what can be done in their work life around that. That needs to be done in private and with time to talk about things. So then you just really want to listen carefully. With empathy and humility, not solving, not fixing, listen, work with the employee to understand what's really happening. Then partner up on a plan. So when you want to invite the employee themselves to, what would help? What do you think would help in this situation? What do you think we need to do? That doesn't mean that's going to be the plan. It means that's the starting point, and you've started by inviting the employee. That helps them have agency, stay responsible for themselves. There may or may not be things that you can do. One thing you want to make sure is the plan does not include subpar performance. They still have to be able to do the core parts of their job, and you want to make sure it's doable, it's possible, and then it meets the requirements of the organization as a whole. And then you do want to follow up and stay on track with that employee afterwards and keep learning because you want this to be durably solved, and you want to make sure that it goes forward in the right way. And you want to really avoid anything that feels punishing. So what will feel punishing is if you only show up when the employee is in distress or there's a problem, they're going to start wanting to avoid you naturally. So staying with them after that and really keeping with them is going to keep that from happening. Next slide. Okay, and just a reminder about some basic things that help people feel engaged with their organizations. They do much better with mission-driven organizations. When leaders are facilitators rather than sort of telling them what to do, it's not necessarily the military. It's like, how can I help you release the best that's within you? How can I help make sure that you're figuring things out? And that's like coaching, mentoring, encouraging people to be self-reflective and to solve their own problems as within the frame that's appropriate for their level. Engage employees at all levels. So everybody counts in your organization. Embrace learning and change as a leadership person. You yourself need to grow and change and be responsive. Data-driven is a big thing, but you can, when you're talking to folks, be sure you're real concrete about what you're talking about. Like, you know, the last 3 shifts, you didn't get your documentation done. That's very concrete. That's that data-driven, and it helps keep the conversation in a place that's not personal. It's just factual. And person-centered practices belong to everyone, not just the people supported. We want to have this in our organizations as well, because everybody's a human being and wants to be thought of in that way. Next slide. Things you can really do that will increase stress: being too rigid and controlling, not getting social support out there. What we talked about, don't allow people to do poorly at their jobs. Because it kind of makes everybody feel like they're not valued and they're not important. And just forgetting how much people are, you know, sometimes just getting to the shift, doing the basics. That is some days that's a major thing, the way the world's been going lately. So you really want to make sure that people feel good about that. Okay, next slide. Just a reminder, we're in that you know, lots of remote work, lots of stuff. This requires people to make better decisions with less support. So that's a challenge right there. So making sure that you're taking your remote supervision responsibilities. I would say that was a place where I fell down as a supervisor, and it's the one thing I would change. I was supervising often in small group homes, so technically we were all together, but we weren't on the same shifts. There were people I literally never saw do their work. But I also literally did not have any proactive way of checking in with them. So you don't necessarily have to observe people, but you do need to connect with them. And some of that is exploring, how's it going at work? How, you know, are there any challenges you're having? Are there things you need to be, you know, that I could be helping you with more? Is there anything you're worried about? You know, making sure that you're connecting in that way is really, really important. Go to the next page, please. Oh, and don't be afraid to use technology with that. FaceTime works and Zoom works just as well as in person, maybe not perfectly, but it really does help. You do have a role in shaping the culture, the team culture globally, and we've talked about that. So making sure that you've adjusted things so that everybody's feeling like they're recognized and they're supported. That helps the team function more neatly, because they're not like, why does she always talk to that one, but she never comes and tells me what's going on, and why did, you know, so you want to really look to that and make sure people have opportunities to have as much autonomy and control as they can in their jobs. Next slide. And then finally, don't forget about yourselves. Most supervisors and managers don't get the training they need. They're not necessarily hired based on skills and competencies you need for the role. So you really want to learn those things, and those things, what's great, there's a ton of stuff out there on supervisory and management stuff that you can do. And we support folks in learning those things, and you can learn them and you can change how your organization is working. Barb, did you have something you wanted to add?
Nope. Just getting ready.
Okay. All right. So, and then just quickly, I'm going to go over some resources just very quickly, and then we're going to jump into a scenario and have discussion around that. So there are a ton of resources out there. I tried to keep it very simple because I don't know about you, but I am overwhelmed with information every day. So I've got 2 slides with just a few things I want to touch on that are possibilities. They may or may not be the best resources for you. I do encourage you to figure out what is the best resource for you. But we do have a publication called the Frontline Initiative. And there's one on self-care for DSPs, which is really helpful. This is really focused on the DSP role. It's probably the only publication in the entire country or world, maybe, that talks about direct support professionals. And so all of those issues could be really, really helpful to you. Invaluable is just a really nice documentary on the profession of direct support. And I find it is really good for educating people who are not as familiar. So it might be how you take to a board, or you take to potential board members or community members that you're trying to enroll differently, maybe in a value campaign or something. Direct Course is an online training product. One thing I just want to point out is we've just had a relaunch of our College of Frontline Supervision and Management and Leadership curriculum. And so That is a really nice resource if folks are interested in learning more about that. I brought up these two, Say Getting to Yes and Getting to Yes with Yourself, two books that come out of the Harvard Negotiation Project. And they're just really helpful for centering yourself when you're in a complex situation where you may have some of your own emotion. Next screen, please. Wellness Recovery Action Plan, I talked to you about it. There's a link to kind of the overview of it. There's also just happens to be this month on October 27th, a free introduction that anybody can sign up for. So I put the link in there. Mental health first aid is something we should know about. This is like the equivalent to physical first aid. It's like, you learn what the signs are that somebody might be having a mental health condition emerging, and you learn what you can do as a lay person and how to help them to the support they need. And then there's just a little article linked to this one on how to cope with secondhand stress, which is really about other people's stress stresses us out, and how do you kind of combat that in a high stress world. So just some resources you may find interesting. I think oh, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't know if you were handing it off to me, Susan.
I will hand it off to you, Barb.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, thank you, Susan, for that. Now, Krista, I just want to do a quick time check because I know we are at I'm on the East Coast right now. And so if we wanted to have questions or just move into questions, or if we want to go with the vignette to guide our questions.
Let's go ahead and go into the scenario,
Great.
just so we can make sure that we have that discussion. If you do have questions, please put it in the chat and we will make sure that we answer that in the resource document.
Great. So during this part, I'm going to facilitate we put together a vignette or a scenario to kind of spar our discussion and communication. And during this, if you can, you are welcome to unmute. I'm going to ask Krista. I can't see everybody. So if you could kind of watch for wherever the little yellow thing, whoever it moves to call on, or if you want to use your raise hand function, that also helps us as well. But for sure, put things in the chat because you all can see the chat and learn from each other. But we put together a vignette, and so I'm going to read it because in case there's anyone that's joining by phone. So Jessica, DSP, has been coming late to the biweekly staff meetings for the last few months. While she used to be an energetic participant, she rarely speaks at all anymore and leaves as soon as she has the chance. Regina, the supervisor for this site, has noticed Jessica's documentation has been missing several times in the last few weeks. There have been a lot of changes lately, and Regina just doesn't feel like she can handle losing anyone. She knows she should talk to Jessica, but she feels overwhelmed. So just thinking about that and what Susan has shared with us today, I'm curious as to what thoughts you have, what you might be thinking about in response to that. And what do you think that Regina should do? So I'm going to just put that in the chat, or if there's anyone wants to unmute and share their thoughts. A quiet group. Maybe think about Regina being in a state where she's feeling unable to do her role, and the importance of self-care and awareness. She may be neglecting a number of things because she's feeling overwhelmed and doesn't know what to do. And I think about, I've been traveling quite a bit for work recently, and I just actually got off a plane, and I'm reminded of the put your oxygen mask on first before you attempt to help others. And so thinking about these changes, we don't often think about the impact on staff. When there are changes, we just expect them to put up with it. It's part of the job, et cetera. So are any of these things? Okay, thanks, Jean. So you could offer to sit in with a discussion or ask Jessica.
And two other chats had come in, Barb, that were about supervisors, I think, and I'm trying to get back to that.
Yep, hopefully Regina's supervisor could give her some support, and then Regina talked to Jessica about her job performance and what is affecting it. Offering to sit down and discuss, talk to Jessica about what parts of the job may be affecting her. So those are all really, really helpful and good responses. I think about it as, what would you do if you were Regina? So just putting it, remember we talked about ourselves and taking care of ourselves as supervisors. I'm curious what you would do if you were Regina. What would be your first thing to do if this was and Jessica was one of your employees? How would you respond?
I'm not sure that we didn't hear some of that, like could offer to sit in with a discussion or ask Jessica about changes when she's alone, not at a meeting. Talk to Jessica about what parts of the job may be affecting her. And just in the, just thinking about this, you guys have hit on two things that are, from my view, in pulling this together are really, really important, which is reaching out to her supervisor, because Jessica has got herself in a situation where she's feeling overwhelmed and not quite prepared. And yes, your supervisor is a support to you as well and should be able to help you out with this. And also that privacy. She does really need to talk to Jessica, even though it feels really overwhelming to her at this point.
Right. Thank you, Susan. And I reframed it to just see if there was anyone else that maybe wanted to add. And we did get an additional response in chat about trying to keep in mind that maybe she's going through personal issues outside of work, but do not push to share with you, keeping your boundaries, and then ask what you could do to accommodate her with the job. So that's a really helpful response from Casey. Thank you. Well, let's move on to the next part of the vignette. So with the support from her manager, Regina, who's the supervisor, prepared herself and asked Jessica to come in early to a shift so they could have a talk. Jessica comes in looking nervous, and before Regina can say anything, Jessica bursts into tears and says, "Please don't tell me I'm fired." She said, I need this job right now." Maybe some of you have had this experience in the past or even more recently. Based on what we've talked about today, again, what are your thoughts? What would you be thinking about if you were Regina? And what do you think that Regina should do next in this part of the vignette? And again, feel free to unmute. I don't see anybody unmuting, but I do see some notes in chat. Krista, is there anyone that has unmuted that wants to respond?
No, I was just typing in my own response.
Oh, great.
I'll just share it. I guess it would be great if Regina gave Jessica a heads up on what the meeting is about and try to reinforce that you're there to support them and that they want to talk through how we can work through this together. I've had meetings with boss that are just like, can you meet at 3? And it's just like that. So, I mean, my anxiety is spiraling for, the 2 days leading up to it or whatever it may be. So I think just being transparent, like, hey, I've noticed this and I would like to talk to you about this and come up with some ideas, like planning together and leaning in, like Susan had pointed out in your presentation.
Thank you. I think that's helpful. And I think Tina in chat indicated, from her take, Jessica's feeling definitely overwhelmed with life, and reassure her that, so there's some clues that might be going on. So I think, Tina, it sounds like you would explore and reassure her that you're just looking to help and support, and in whatever way she is overwhelming her, and to be empathetic and listening ear to Jessica. And I think that's really an important point, and Susan talked about it earlier, is being careful not to insert information. We might make guesses about things that we think might be going on or be part of the challenge or what's causing it, but we really want to explore with that person to make sure we're guessing right before we jump to any conclusions as supervisors. And that's it's a skill, and something we should, as supervisors, practice every day. Let's see. I think those were some of the highlights. Similar things Regina should reassure her right away. So offering that reassurance and support. So the next part of this discussion vignette is she took your advice and assures Jessica that she would not fire her without warning unless there was direct cause. She brings her some water and gives Jessica a minute to regain her composure. We do have to talk about some performance issues, but I really want to understand what is happening. It seems like things have been tough recently. I've been doing, and Regina or Jessica, I've been doing everything I can, but with all the changes since COVID, I'm exhausted, says Jessica. I can't get any time off because there is no one to fill in, and you haven't been here except for meetings. So again, thinking about this part of this next phase of the conversation that's happening, or this vignette, what thoughts do you have? What might you be thinking about in terms of responding in this situation? And or what do you think Regina should do in response to this? And again, give people a moment to put something into chat. And again, does Regina acknowledge and apologize for her part and her absences? And I think it reminds me of where Susan had talked about leaning in, regulate, take it slow, asking the right questions in the right environment, listening carefully with empathy and humility, partner on a plan, follow up and learn. And for Christy, who's driving, be very careful. Thank you. I would ask if she wanted to take time off, or if so, offer to fill her shift with other staff or work the shift myself. So really trying to kind of figure out what's in your, within your scope of your core responsibilities that you can do to provide support. And Sadie indicated, making sure that Jessica feels heard and understood. I know we are at time. There's a number of other things that avoid becoming defensive with Roberta. So I want to pause there. I think, Christy, are you going to save the chat? Okay, so that people can have that. I think we'll probably have to pause there.
Can I just sum up two little things? Lovely that you guys have great ideas, and these are really, a lot of these really great. Make sure to invite the employee to let you know what they think would help, because the minute you start trying to solve their problem for them, you may or may not hit the mark, and they may not be willing to then share more. So make sure you invite them to share. And the regulation part is really important, but then don't forget to follow up and keep it going. Figure out a plan with them that's going to be workable and is actually going to help them with what the challenge is, because what she has said here may not be the whole thing yet, right? So we might not have gone far enough. So I really appreciate the time. I know I went a little over, sorry.
It was such a good presentation that it was just hard to, so we appreciate you guys staying on just a little bit later, and thank you so much for your time. Yes, we will send out a recording of this and the slides. Susan and Barb were nice enough to let us send that out, so we will make sure that the rest of that vignette is captured along with the resources. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to send it to us, because we can try to address those in the chat. And really appreciate the participation today. Like, so many great things that I'm actually like writing down for myself. So thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. Our next session is November 2nd, I believe. And we will be talking about how to create an inclusive and welcoming environment, work environment with diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So we hope to see you then, and we will be sending out an evaluation. Please fill out that evaluation. It's so vital to us to understand if we're doing a good job and make any tweaks. So we greatly appreciate when you fill those out. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Thanks again, Susan and Barb. We really
thanks for your time. It was fun.
Yes, thank you for the invitation.
Talk to y'all later. Bye.
Bye, everyone.